We're in the change of classes right now, so it's going to be a little loud before they shuffle it.
All right, no problem.
You're frozen. Oh, there you go. Oh, I was. Yes. We have quite a few absences today. I think maybe 4.
Okay. Well, hey, Ms. Warrow, just you can remind people that the lectures are always recorded and put on Blackboard. So if anybody misses class, they should be catching up on that info that they've missed by watching the lecture, so that you know, they can get the same classroom experience as anybody else.
So if you're not here, you're still responsible for the material. Where's my permission slip? Are you going? Why not? I need that stuff Monday morning. I got to go Attention, exact, please. You have your permission slip? All right, let's get mustard on and then get your permission. Brady Rest, Cahill, Campbell, Holman, Corby, Livingston, Lockheed, Pickering, Urban, Winfield, attend hut, seats. So I need your permission slips right now, please. And then, Dr. Terry, take the floor. We cannot wait to see you again in person on Monday.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Monday as well, and hopefully what I'm going to talk about today will help you prepare for Monday's session. Now, I've asked Ms. Sullivan, who is going to be leading the session again on Monday, to essentially demonstrate the different varieties of source material that you may be putting your hands on for the research projects. But before we get there, I think that what I should probably do is walk you through the process of how you're going to go about collecting research for this project, because you need to know that, yes, there are books out there, there are articles in books, there are journals on the stacks and in the shelves and those kind of things, and that information is valid and available. I also recognize that many of you may not be able to get to the library to get those types of sources. But you may find that some of the sources that you're looking for are available in like the Buffalo Public Library, which is just right around the corner from your school. So if you're there and you're looking to grab some of those sources, they're available. It's just some, they may not have everyone that we're looking at, and we may not have everyone we're looking at either. So what I want to talk to you about today is how you're going to go about doing research remotely. And that means accessing Damon's databases so that you can actually do the research from your school, from any computer, any place in the world. You should be able to do research on these subjects. So first of all, I think if I got to flip over to the computer to show you exactly what I'm talking about. So on the front page of your Damon account, right? So if you sign into, as a Damon student, which you have your username and password to do that, right? You go to mydamon.edu and you put your username and password in there, and up comes the library password, or I'm sorry, it comes the library link. When you click on that library link, it takes you to this page, and this is what Ms. Sullivan was showing us last week, right? Where you do your searches here. This is a search box that covers everything that's in the library, as well as other things that you can find remotely. In other words, what you will find in databases and electronically. So sure, it has information that's on the stacks, it's got books, it's all that other stuff that's available that you can put your hands on. So what I want to talk to you about today is, well, how do you do research that is done remotely? In other words, how do you get your hands on just the electronic sources? Because for some of you, you may find that this is the only tool that you have to do electronic research, or the only way that you can do your research is by doing the electronic research. So let me just highlight for you then what you will do. Down here, and you need to making notes of this, right? So on the front page of our library website, you will see down here a link called Databases and Web Resources. Does everybody see that, or do I need to make this bigger? Do you see this link right here, Databases and Web Resources? Cahill, you seeing that? All right, thank you. All right, when you click on that databases, what you've got is 182 databases that Damon College owns, right? So there's a million different databases in there. And we don't need 182 databases to be doing searches in, because we're going to end up with a bunch of material that we don't need. So let me just tell you that where you need to go is you need to click the letter M here. And when you click the letter M, you will find down at the end, at the bottom of that list, the MLA International Bibliography. Does everybody see that MLA? Let me see if I can make this bigger. No, I can't. I don't have any way to make this screen bigger. I'm sure I do, but I just don't know right now. All right, so at the bottom of that page is the MLA International Bibliography link. Click that, and you will end up here, right? So you can see I'm searching the MLA International Bibliography, right? That's my database that I'm searching, and I'm telling you to go here because this is the easiest place to collect research that you're looking for in order to make this argument that you're trying to develop. So I'm just going to assume that you are working on paper number 4 by developing, maybe Young Goodman Brown or A Good Man is Hard to Find. I mean, you can tool around with this all you want and play with it. My point here is that I'm just going to type in some titles, and what I'm going to find is going to be a whole lot of useful material. Now, when I type in my title, just so you know, I'm going to use quotation marks around that title, because if I do that, it will restrict the database to just look for Young Goodman Brown or A Good Man is Hard to Find in that order. In other words, it wants to look for those words only. If I type in Young Goodman Brown without quotation marks, it's going to bring up every source that has the word Young in it, every source that has Goodman in it, and every source that has Brown in it, not necessarily Young Goodman Brown. So that's the reason why I'm going to put it in quotation marks. So I say Young, and as you can see, by me typing that in partially, look at all the options that I've got already. Right, Young Goodman Brown symbolism, Young Goodman Brown analysis, Young Goodman Brown Nathaniel Hawthorne, criticism, faith, right, religion, internal conflict, literary criticism. All these things are what we really want. But I'm just going to continue my process here, Young Goodman Brown, and I'm going to end my quotes. I'm going to hit search, and what I should find, as you can see, I did not do a full text search. I did not do a linked, uh-oh. Why is that coming up? Hang on a second. This is a problem. Oh, great. All right, well, we've got a system. I'm going to have to call the library here. I'm going to try it one more time. All right, let me get back to this point down here. Notice that I'm not going to do a linked full text search. Now, I could do a linked full text search if that's all I'm after is just our electronic database information, right? So that may be of use to some of you if you're not going to put your feet on the ground in our library, right? Because of getting every source that's available out there might not be useful because you might not be able to access it if you're not here on our campus. So if you want to click on that linked full text, that makes sense. I'm going to try this Young Goodman Brown one more time, and then I'm going to have a panic attack. I'm going to do it with... Great. Doesn't work for me. All right. What I would find, and so that everybody knows, is I would find a whole pile of sources. And what I wanted to show you from this was that in every one of these sources that we bring up, let me see if Goodman is hard to find comes up. In every one of those sources that comes up, I'm going to be able to click on that, and I'm going to be able to essentially find the, I'm going to be able to find actual articles that have exactly what I need to do this type of research. And if our library was functioning, which it's not, and you can tell I'm getting aggravated by that, but because this database page isn't working, I can't show you exactly what's there, but I can tell you this, right? There's going to be article after article, and a lot of these articles are going to be useful to you, but a lot of them are not going to be useful to you. So you kind of have to read the titles, and you have to kind of look at the abstracts in order to find out if this is something that's going to be meaningful to you. So from my perspective, I'm telling you there's a ton of different sources that are going to be here, but if I'm looking for it, I may find those things to be interesting, but if you're looking for it, you probably are not going to find most of these interesting. So let me tell you what some sources are that you should be looking for once that list comes up, right? For example, kind of the entry-level research tools that would make sense to you for what we're doing can be found in a couple of journals. So write these journal names down, because if you see a source that pops up with this journal name, these two journal names, those two journal names will probably be good sources for you to use. One is entitled Explicator. So Explicator is spelled E-X-P-L-I-C-A-T-O-R, right? So Explicator is a good journal because the reviews are usually, the articles are usually about, a page or two long. They hit the highlights of what the current arguments are, and they jump right into the kind of issues that we're working toward. The other journal that you should be keeping a lookout for would be the one entitled Studies in Short Fiction. Studies in Short Fiction is kind of a, it's a step up from Explicator. The titles are going to be a little bit more complicated. The information is going to be a little bit more complicated, but it's still going to be talking about issues that are relevant to what we're doing. So let me just repeat those, right? Explicator, Studies in Short Fiction. If you start to see titles, popping up that have those journals associated with them, click on those and see what they have to offer, or look at those titles and really kind of scrutinize them. All right. So what you're going to find is that a lot of these articles are going to be presenting information. It's going to be all over the place, right? I mean, you're going to find some that are dealing with, like the history of the story, or something that has nothing to do with what you're looking for at all. It could be like art in that time period or something. That's not relevant to you, so you kind of have to be able to to fish around and, to find the types of sources that are going to be relevant to your particular subject matter. So it's obvious that the library webpage isn't going to work. It's going to aggravate me now to no end. But let's just continue on without that and talk about something else. What you will be then referencing, I'm going to back off this page. I'm going to go to the to our overhead or document camera. On the document camera, you should be able to see. Oh, you guys seeing anything on there? I'm not.
No,
Is it just a snowstorm? Is it just a snowstorm?
Yeah.
it's white out.
Great. Well, as you can see, I mean, this is just aggravating to no end. All right, I'm going to go back to this camera. We'll abandon that. All right. What I wanted to remind you of is that all of the articles that you were finding or you would be finding in this library database, had we been able to actually look at them, right? All those articles that we would be finding in there would be then referenced according to page 551 in the handbook, right? Which means you've got an article found in a database. And that's why I'm just drawing attention to this. Now, you don't have to have page 551 open, but I certainly want to just reinforce with you the process. Now, we talked about in that little lecture that I gave Wednesday, when most of you were out of town, we talked about how to produce that references page. And that references page, folks, I just want to remind you, that is a primary responsibility for how you meet the basic requirements of a research paper, right? You have to be able to follow the rules of the MLA or any other style manual that's out there. So for our purposes today, what I just want to review with you is the fact that we have an entry here. So you're going to be finding all sorts of different authors, all sorts of different titles, everything that's going to be relevant here. And then after the title of the article, then you need to go find that journal. And that journal, as I said, Explicator, Studies in Short Fiction, those are good ones to start with. There are others out there, and I would encourage you to read those other ones, but I'm just saying that those two are probably going to be the ones that lead you to the easiest information that you can use. You need a volume number, a series number if they've got it, the year that was done, and then page numbers, which they should be able to explain to you on the bibliographic page. The next piece of information that's available there, though, is the name of the database, which means that you have to write out MLA International Bibliography. That has to be in italics and capitalize the name of that database, and then you can put the word web and the date. So again, page 551, that's going to be the most important page for a lot of you because the majority of your sources will probably come in that format. All right, so page 551, database, MLA style, that's the kind of thing that you need to be able to follow. So one of the other things that I saw that Doug had sent me his sheet and of that assignment. You don't need to send me that assignment sheet. I appreciate the fact that you did, Doug, but I mean, you don't have to send me that assignment sheet. The message that I'm trying to send by giving you that is that you need to be able to learn this system of rules, right? So that what you should be doing is tabbing that book, putting marks on, maybe pieces of paper or something in that book to let you know where to go find certain pieces of information, or keeping those page numbers fresh in your notes so you know where to jump to in order to get to that information. So that references page, key, getting us started, going in the right direction. That's the thing that if it doesn't meet the format, I can't find your research. And if I can't find your research, then you've got a problem, right? So we'll come back to this this search thing in a few minutes. But what I want to talk to you about now, just so we don't waste this time that we have together, because we don't have very much time, ever, when it seems like things go racing by. And by the way, I just want everybody to know this. We have 13 class days before the end of the semester, right? I mean, we've got to finish paper 4 and we've got to start paper 5 and we've got a Thanksgiving break in there, right? Time is just flying by we need to be able to do a lot of work in a very short period of time. So I really can't waste any more time in doing this. What I'll do is, when I get back to my office, I'll create another video lecture that shows how to navigate this NLA bibliography page, and I'll show you what kind of sources are popping up on there, and then I'll send that back to everybody by email in case anyone's got time to look at it this weekend. But let's move on to something else. The other issue that's going to be key for your success in writing this research paper is your ability to avoid plagiarism. So let's talk about what plagiarism is in its kind of various forms. Plagiarism is a violation of the law. Let's start there, right? In other words, if you plagiarize, that's like stealing. And how do you steal when you're just doing research? Well, it comes down to this. I spend my professional life teaching classes, but doing research on the outside. So I have research partners all across the country. I write books. I produce research articles. I put information out there in the public domain. That's how I keep my job, right? In other words, that's how my peers and my people who work above me expect me to be able to produce information that the rest of the academic world will want to read. So that's why there is such a thing called copyright, because that information that I publish belongs to me, and because it belongs to me, I am able to progress in my field and keep my job. So it's protected by the law because we can't let other people come and just take our work and call it their own and then use that in order to make themselves, qualify for their own jobs. You're obviously not competing for professorships, but it's still the same in that if you take someone else's information and call it your own, then you're stealing. And from the perspective of a professor, you should recognize this. I would rather have someone come into my house and steal my television because I can replace that television pretty easily. What I can't replace is my reputation and my work that is all kind of wound up in this world of publication that I'm involved in. So it's a whole lot easier to steal someone else's ideas, but it's a whole lot more damaging to those people you're stealing from. So just understand that the rules here are there for a reason. All right, so what kind of plagiarism is there? There are really 4 types of plagiarism that you need to be aware of, right? And this is for your benefit from this point forever and ever for the rest of your lives, right? 4 types of plagiarism. The first type of plagiarism is if you just take someone else's work and put your name on it. In other words, if you take someone's paper that they wrote on Young Goodman Brown, right? And that's easy to find, right? All you got to do is go to some website and just type in Young Goodman Brown. You're going to find all sorts of college papers out there on Young Goodman Brown. If you take that paper and you put your name on it and you call it your own, right? Not only is that a violation of every standard of ethics out there, but it's also illegal to do if that information is copyrighted. All right, so stealing someone else's work in its entirety, that's one form of plagiarism. And I don't expect anybody out there to be that crazy that they're just going to go put their name on something and call it their own. Now, how do we combat plagiarism? Well, we own this service called Turnitin.com. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this. I wrote about it a little bit on our course entry or syllabus, and it was on the first entry of our Blackboard page. But essentially what Turnitin.com does is it's a search engine. You take every paper that's ever been written for my classes, I take those papers and I submit them to Turnitin.com. Turnitin.com is housed in California, right? And what they have is this huge, monstrous set of databases and servers out there where they take that paper, they make a copy of it, and they put it into their database. And then, so anytime anyone decides to take your paper and use it, if that happens, and I run that paper through Turnitin.com, your paper will come up linked to that paper so that I can see that if you stole that paper from someone, it came from Shay Livingston, right? So I know exactly where the source was. So, and this has happened here on this campus before, and you need to know it, right? Where a student just tried to, get away with writing not writing the paper and just kind of took someone else's work and put her name on it. And then when I submitted it, Turnitin.com, she had no defense, because not only was the person who stole the paper in trouble, but the person who gave her the paper is in trouble too, because now her name is on it. So if Shay gives her paper to Cam, you're both guilty. Cam of plagiarism, Shay of just being unethical, right? So from the ranks, or from the perspective of a college, that is criminality, right? And if you're that unethical, and if you're that much of a criminal, then you are expelled, right? So the college puts, they make a file for you. You've got your transcripts. They put a big red X on the transcript, and they essentially issue you a dismissal letter, right? You're kicked out of college, right? So cheating, obviously, you get kicked out of college for. Stealing someone else's intellectual property, you get kicked out of college for. All right, so those are pretty kind of scary words that I'm throwing out at you. There are other forms of plagiarism that are just as, I would say, egregious, right? They're just as bad, but they're not so blatant as just taking someone else's paper and putting your name on it. For example, one type of plagiarism would be if you were borrowing something. Let's say, some of you were writing about Easterly, right? And the article that Joan Easterly produced, and in that article, if you were to take Easterly's ideas and not reference Easterly, in other words, if you don't introduce Easterly's name, if you don't put a page number at the end of that sentence where you borrowed information from Easterly, or her name and page number, then you are failing to give credit to the author for that information. So I just got done telling you, if I steal someone else's work, right, that's plagiarism, where I just put my name on somebody else's paper. But a type of plagiarism number 2 is failing to give credit. So if you're borrowing information from a source, if you're making an argument and then you're using a research source to make your argument, failure to give credit is you're just as guilty of plagiarism. It's just a much more difficult kind to find. So what Turnitin.com does is it does a search of the papers, and then what it looks for is strings of language. So that when I can show you this on Monday when we get together, what a Turnitin.com originality report looks like. But you'll get I'll get the paper back, and it'll have strings of words highlighted, and then it'll have links to it, and it'll tell me who that paper is owned by and where I can find that paper. So all I have to do is click on it, and boom, up comes the paper that the information was stolen from. So as a word of warning here, right? The issue of plagiarism is kind of a frightening thing to be dealing with if you don't know the rules, right? So we'll talk about those rules next week so that you don't make any of these types of mistakes. But I certainly want you to start being aware of upfront what the types of plagiarism are. So putting your name on someone else's paper, that's the most easy to find and easy to catch. Failing to give credit to an author whose information is copyrighted, that's another kind, not so easy to catch. A third kind of plagiarism, which we ultimately need to know about, is using the language of the original author. In other words, I know that many of you are aware of what a direct quote is, but I think that what happens sometimes is that, in an attempt to not quote directly so much, that we want to paraphrase more, we want to synthesize that information more, but in our process of paraphrasing or synthesizing that information out, we use language that the author used. And if we don't put that language in direct quotes to show that that language was taken from the original source, then we are guilty of plagiarism. So three types of plagiarism now. Putting your name on someone else's paper, not giving credit where credit is due, and taking language from the author's source, right? Taking language from the original. We know how to use direct quotes, but what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to control the information. You should be writing about the sources, describing what they do, right? The whole purpose of writing a research paper is to tell me, especially from your perspective now, right? This is what research papers are going to do. you are going to have something you're trying to accomplish. You have an argument that you're trying to resolve. What you need to do then is find research that helps you make your argument. In order to have that help available, you need to describe what those authors do in their sources. I know a lot of you, in an attempt to use that source with paper number 3 that I gave you, you just kind of fished out, let's say, a few words for a direct quote and then thought that was sufficient. Well, that was sufficient if you don't know how to write research papers. Well, now we're looking beyond that. We're looking for you to develop the arguments that these other sources were making. In other words, you need to kind of summarize what the source was doing in order to build that conversation up to say, okay, here's what this person is doing, and this is what they're arguing, and this is how it fits in with my argument. All right, so as a general rule now, research is going to be described in your paper. You're going to introduce that source, and you're going to tell me what that source does in relationship to the argument that you're trying to create, right? So it's not about just taking a few words from a source and putting direct quotes around it and calling that a source, right? It's about developing a conversation that here's what that author was doing. This is what I'm doing, here's what the author is doing, and this is how these arguments either work together or work against each other. Is everybody clear on this?
Yes.
Okay, because this is where I need you to be for papers 4 and 5. I need you to be at that point where you're developing the research by telling me what they're doing. So this leads me inevitably to the 4th type of plagiarism that's out there, because as we're summarizing, as we're synthesizing, as we're discussing what these authors are doing, right, we are paraphrasing what those authors have written, right? So paraphrasing, so direct quotes, they're a factor, right? We got to make sure we're quoting directly and we're quoting accurately, but also the process of paraphrasing information down is also relevant and important, because if we mismanage that information, in other words, if you tell me that the author is arguing something and you write inaccurately about what that author is arguing, then you have misrepresented that author's intended purpose. That, my friends, is the 4th type of plagiarism that's out there. So failure to represent accurately the author's ideas can get you into trouble as well. In other words, you can't tell me that the author was arguing something that the author didn't argue. So there's an expectation that you'll be reading these articles carefully, that you'll understand exactly what they're trying to do, and then you'll just kind of build those arguments into your paper to help you make your case. As I said before, I'm really looking for somewhere in the neighborhood of about 4 secondary sources for this next paper, right? So that means you're going to have to get those articles, you're going to have to read them, you're going to have to understand them, and you're going to have to bring them up as part of your argument for this paper, right? As you're bringing them up, you've got to be aware that you're not using language from the original unless you're putting that language in direct quotes. And you've got to make sure that you're managing the information accurately and correctly, or you're guilty of a different type of plagiarism, which is the mismanagement of the author's ideas. So let me review. 4 types of plagiarism, right? And these are very easy to understand now, because once you get into this research process, you'll see it very clearly. The first kind is just blatant cheating, putting your name on somebody else's paper. The second kind is just failure to put citations in or to alert the reader that you're now transitioning into a discussion about the author's work. The third kind is failing to use language appropriately. In other words, you're taking language from the author, from the original text, and you're calling it your own, which would mean you're not direct quoting accurately. And the fourth kind is mismanaging the information. In other words, your paraphrase does not accurately represent the author's ideas, right? Those 4 different levels of plagiarism can get you in trouble. At this college, we have a 2 strikes and you're out rule, just so you know. What we found over time is that people cheat and don't even know that they're cheating. So what we do is we establish a file in the dean's office. So if anybody is caught cheating, if anyone's caught, doing and making any of these mistakes with plagiarism, right, we put the paper on file and we put it in the dean's office so that if it happens again, that person is then expelled. But I want you to know that the majority of cases that we deal with plagiarism are usually done because people just don't know what they're doing, right? And they make mistakes. So I'm here to tell you that I'm not the police, right, that's coming after you to try to hold you to the letter of the law. I'm going to be working with you to make sure that you don't make these mistakes, and especially when you get to college, right, and you are asked to write research papers. So if you do make mistakes, I'm hopefully going to be looking at these as learning experiences, not necessarily, accusing you of plagiarism. Now, if you go and just copy someone else's paper and put your name on it, obviously there's an intent to cheat there, and that's a whole different, set of circumstances, which would draw, instant failure of the course, instant failure of the assignment, right? And then you would have a big red X on your transcript. But from the perspective of a professor who's teaching you how to do research, I expect you to make mistakes. I expect you to have questions, but I don't expect you to be reckless. And I guess that's where I ultimately want to get to today, is that you have to be aware that information is protected by the law, and that you can't just take it and call it your own without giving credit where credit is due, being true to the language that's there, and being true to the author's intended purpose. So if you can understand those areas of plagiarism, then you'll understand how easy it is to avoid plagiarism and just do your own work. All right? So let me just stop right there and ask you if you've got any questions about that, because, I think this is a really important topic. When we get together next week, I want to talk to you about different types of plagiarism that you're going to see with direct quotes, and different types of plagiarism you're going to see with paraphrasing. Because if you make mistakes, right, we need to learn how to avoid that. All right, any questions about the issues of plagiarism that I'm talking about right now?
Some other colleges and institutions have a zero tolerance policy for plagiarism of any kind. So if you're pretty sure it's I, you're done. Pretty sure it can be, you're done. But the reason that we work with you and look at drafts and do these things and do this process is so you don't get tripped up in that system, right? So just be cool.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point, is that we have different rules in different institutions, right? And that, can be confusing. What we did is we started with our 2 strikes rule, because we found that so many people were just unaware of what plagiarism was. And that is, something that we've got, to get a handle on. So we would have lost 25% of our freshman class, 10 years ago, because we had so many people coming in and, plagiarizing. People were taking information off of the internet. People were doing all sorts of crazy things out there that, that without giving credit to it. And we were, fully aware that they just didn't know any better. And so that's the reason why we kind of took a different approach. So that's why we have the 2 strikes rule. All right, I do have now, the computer system is up. So for the last few minutes here, I want to just switch over to the local computer, right, so I can show you this information. All right, now, can everybody see what's being projected here?
Yes.
All right, good. So if you take a look at this, right, a path to middle-class manhood in early 19th century America, is that something that I really want to focus on? Probably not. Leading students down dark paths, how teachers talk about it, is that an issue? Probably not. Take a look at this right here. This entry, his dying hour was gloom, crises of faith, and Nathaniel Hawthorne's Young Goodman Brown, right? Bells should be going off in your head, and you should be thinking to yourself, yeah, I want to get my hands on that. As you can see, this is a book, right? So this is not a linked full text, but we've got a book, and look at the subjects here: spiritual crisis, loss, faith, religious doubt. These are the kind of things that we talked about, right? But more importantly is this. In the entries that I was going over the other day, I was showing you that sometimes we have chapters in a book, or we have articles in a book. And you can see right here that the author of this book, of this article, is Robert Clevey. His book, though, or his article, is in this book by Robert Evans. So when I was talking about those chapters in a book, this is what I was talking about. Here's the the city, the state, the year, the publication, and it shows you all the book information that you need. But it's an article that appears in a book. Robert Evans is the editor. Robert Clevey is the author of this article. So as you can see, this is a pretty important text that you would probably want to get your hands on. So you would probably do a search on this to find out if you can get it. What I also think you should be doing is you should be scanning down and you should be looking here at these texts. As you can see, there's Eureka Studies and Teaching Short Fiction. Well, that might have something to do, right, with us moving toward an understanding of evil. It may not have anything to do with university freshmen, so I would kind of hunt around for other things. Go and do a hunt and look down here at these journal titles, and you will find the journal like Explicator right there, right? So I would encourage you, click on that PDF. When you open up that text, you're now going to see that this Explicator article is just a couple of pages long, right? Pretty easy read, and it's going to be doing the kind of thing that we are wanting to do, right? Notice that this concluding paragraph here is talking about Brown's internal conflict, right? So it doesn't answer the question whether it's a dream. The story suggests that he falls asleep and that all these things are happening. And essentially, what we get back to is this bewilderment. What is an illusion? What's dream? What is the situation that is relevant to what we're trying to argue? Well, if you go back up here, you're going to find all sorts of reasons to think about that, right? And here's some good quotes that they bring up from the text, and this is the kind of stuff that you guys brought up, right? That he's telling Faith to resist the wicked one, and then you find there's this chill in the air and the coldest dew, and that certain people made something out of that dew in the air. Go back to the article list, and I'll just show that if you just keep scrolling down, right, you're going to find other types of articles that are going to be, just as relevant. And I would see, something down here like Young Goodman Brown, the Serpentine staff. That's something, I know, Cameron, you had talked about the staff in your paper. I know other people did too, right? And we've got several more pages of these articles to find. 131 sources, essentially some better than others, but all relevant. If you're not thinking about doing Young Goodman Brown, I just want to show you that a good man is hard to find. It's right there, right? Same thing. I'm going to put quotes around it, though, to make sure that we search only for those words in that order. And now look what they've got here, right? A source for EAT, right? And good man is hard to find. Maybe, but take a look at this. Here's an article. A good man is hard to find, right? Cliches, storytelling, dark humor. If you take a look at this, this is an article that's in a book again, right? You can see the book over here on the side of the entry. So I want you to recognize journals, books, they're both going to be showing up in here, and you're just going to need to plow through these things and find out what's going to be relevant to you. So obviously you can see some of the stuff might not be relevant, right? The proverb may not be relevant. The illustrations might not be relevant, but certainly a validation of the unreasonable, that might be important. You can scroll down and you can find that Explicator is going to be in here again. You're going to find, look at all these books down in here, right? But as you can see, here's Catherine Keel's A Good Man is Hard to Find in Explicator. I'd click on that full text, and you're going to find, here's a pretty short article, right? But she's going to make the same point. However, she's talking about the grandmother and kind of connecting it with Samuel Taylor Coleridge's Rime of the Ancient Mariner. It doesn't matter if she's talking about the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. What matters is what she's talking about Young Goodman Brown. So even though this isn't relevant specifically to Young Goodman Brown on its own, it's still making commentary about Young Goodman Brown that you can talk about, right? There's the whole bit about shooting a lady, right? Divine connection, releasing her from her discontent. All of this information that we're talking about is in here too. All right, look, we can do a lot more with this as time goes on. I just want you to see where I'm coming from when I say I want you to do research out there. That's where I want you to be. I want you to be in that environment, that MLA bibliography, scanning down through that list, clicking on those articles, reading them, and then making a bibliography out of that and using those authors' ideas to develop your arguments. You with me on this? Yeah, it's a lot of work, but that's the way it goes, right? And when we're done with this one, we're going to start all over. We're going to do it again for paper number 5.
It gets so much easier as you just keep doing it. It's like tying your shoes was hard when you were 4, but you just do it now. Brushing your teeth. These are all things I do with my preschooler that you guys wake up and just do. And when you become more mature college students and you're doing this all the time, it's just how you will write a sentence. You'll keep a working file of the sources you're using and having notes on what this person said about this person, and maybe, you know, little short paragraphs and connecting the information. You have to work like detectives. You're awesome, and you're very smart, and you're capable. It's just gonna, you know,
Yeah, I mean, this is your first real go-round. I'm certain, well, maybe I'm not certain, but I'm probably fairly certain that this may be the first time that you've actually written, you know, a real research style paper. But this is, once you get used to it, once you figure out what you're supposed to do, then the process becomes easy. So just, you know, buckle down, don't get discouraged, just work hard, and it'll all come together. And that's the reason why we're taking the time to do this together, so that you don't make mistakes and you learn how to process the information, and it'll all become easier in the end. All right, we're going to see all of you on Monday, hopefully. And we should be able, if you want to start looking at research on Monday, let's do it. Okay? All right, folks. All right, see you then.